German tanks that had driven to the edge of Moscow were now moving west, not toward the Soviet capital, but away from it. On December 5th, 1941, with Operation Barbarossa stalled and Army Group Center stretched across a frozen front, the Red Army attacked. Within days, the force meant to finish the Soviet Union was fighting to escape. Yet this was not the collapse Moscow expected. The Germans would retreat, but they would not be destroyed. The first blow fell north of Moscow, then widened along the front on December 6th. Georgy Zhukov, commanding the Western Front, struck the exposed German wedges near Klin and Tula. The objective was to remove these armored salients before they could dig in. Soviet troops cut toward the roads behind them. German columns, threatened with entrapment, began withdrawing through deep snow and abandoning vehicles that could no longer move. The Red Army did not possess overwhelming superiority everywhere. Its strength came from concentrating fresh armies at selected points, including formations transferred from the Soviet interior and Far East. German intelligence had underestimated the reserves Moscow could still produce and how vulnerable its own army had become. Fuel, ammunition, food, and winter clothing traveled hundreds of kilometers over damaged railways and frozen tracks. When the attack came, Germany had almost no operational reserve available to stop it. The cold mattered, but it did not command the battle alone. Engines failed, weapons froze, and frostbite emptied German ranks. Yet winter became decisive because Operation Typhoon had already consumed men, vehicles, horses, and supplies. Soviet resistance had slowed the advance, while German logistics had never been adequate for the distances involved. The Red Army suffered in the same temperatures, but fought closer to its railheads and had more suitable clothing. North of Moscow, Soviet troops drove toward Klin, the road hub supplying German armored forces closest to the capital. A breakthrough threatened to trap units still farther east. The Germans escaped, but only by retreating rapidly and leaving damaged equipment behind. Klin fell on December 15th, and the northern spearhead was pushed back more than 50 kilometers. The intended encirclement did not close, yet the danger to Moscow was clearly receding. South of the capital, the German position around Tula also unraveled. The city had held throughout November, denying the invaders the road network they needed. Now Soviet armies attacked the long flank of the German salient. The 2nd Panzer Army withdrew before its escape routes could be cut. As gaps opened between German formations, Soviet mobile groups pushed toward Kaluga, an important supply center. It was fully retaken on December 30th. The counteroffensive was no longer merely clearing Moscow's outskirts. It was testing whether Army Group Center could remain intact. Hitler answered with orders to stand fast and forbade broad withdrawals without permission. These orders are sometimes credited with saving Army Group Center, but their effect was mixed. Holding fortified villages and road junctions prevented some retreats from becoming routes. Elsewhere, refusing to move exposed units to encirclement, and local commanders withdrew when survival demanded it. Hitler dismissed senior commanders and tightened his control, but he could not restore the offensive. By early January, German forces had been driven back roughly 100 to 250 kilometers in different sectors. Moscow was no longer under immediate assault, and the central striking force of Barbarossa had suffered its first major operational retreat. This was not literally the Wehrmacht's first withdrawal. German troops had already retreated elsewhere in the Soviet Union. What made Moscow different was its scale. Germany's largest concentration in the east had failed before the capital and surrendered much of the ground won during its final advance. The battle could have ended there. Stalin decided it was only beginning. Moscow had been saved, but retreat was no longer enough. Army Group Center would be destroyed. At a Kremlin conference on January 5th, Stalin pressed for offensives across almost the entire Soviet-German front. According to Zhukov's later account, he argued that available strength should remain concentrated west of Moscow. Officials also warned that weapons and ammunition were insufficient for attacks everywhere. Stalin prevailed. Beginning on January 8th, the offensive widened toward Rzhev and Vyazma. The new objective was far more ambitious: cut the roads and railway behind Army Group Center, surround its forward armies, and turn retreat into annihilation. At first, the map suggested it might work. Soviet forces broke through west of Rzhev and penetrated behind German lines. Farther south, cavalry under Pavel Belov moved through forests toward Vyazma, while infantry advanced from the east and airborne troops landed behind German positions. By late January, Soviet detachments had reached the main highway west of Vyazma. Several German armies depended on that artery, but the Soviet thrusts were narrow, widely separated, and difficult to supply. A penetration on a map was not yet a solid encirclement. The Red Army had advanced beyond reliable roads and railheads. Ammunition, food, and fuel came forward by sled, horse, or truck through deep snow. Radios were scarce, coordination uncertain, and many units had fought without rest since early December. Instead of concentrating enough artillery and infantry to crush German strongpoints, Soviet attacks spread across multiple directions. The decision to expand the offensive had created opportunities everywhere, but decisive strength nowhere. Meanwhile, the Germans anchored their defense on towns, roads, and heated shelters. When flying weather improved, the Luftwaffe delivered supplies and attacked exposed Soviet columns. German commanders used limited withdrawals to shorten the front, then concentrated armor and assault guns against the most dangerous breakthroughs. Near Rzhev, Walter Model closed the breach on January 23rd, cutting supply routes to Soviet troops already deep in the rear. Around Vyazma, German forces kept narrow corridors open. Soviet cavalry, airborne troops, and infantry now risked becoming the encircled force. By the end of January, the Red Army had won the battle for Moscow's approaches, but not the greater battle of encirclement. Germany lost ground, equipment, experienced troops, and any prospect of ending the war in 1941. The Soviets saved their capital, seized the initiative, and proved the Wehrmacht could be driven backward, but paid heavily and left exposed forces trapped behind German lines. Army Group Center survived, still holding a dangerous salient near Rzhev. Moscow was therefore a genuine strategic defeat for Germany, not the decisive turning of the war. Hitler's army had retreated. Destroying it would require a Red Army not merely resilient, but capable of concentrating and sustaining victory